Today, lovely teachers, we're joined by Crystal Boyak. So, Crystal is a leader in early childhood violin pedagogy and the best-selling author of We Violin, Music for Young Violinist, Preparatory to Twinkle. She currently teaches at the University of New Mexico's String Lab School and runs a private teaching Suzuki Violin and Music Together school in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Crystal loves spending her time gardening, doing yoga, and adventuring with her husband and 4 young children. One fun little extra fact about Crystal is that she's actually colorblind. Today we're going to learn more about how Crystal came up with her method, where it came from, and the whole story of getting it out there into the world. Let's dive in. So, welcome, Crystal. First of all, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your studio for those who don't know anything about you?
Thank you so much for having me. My name is Crystal Boyak. I live in Albuquerque, New Mexico in the States. I teach out of my home, and then also at the University of New Mexico, I teach violin and also music together, an early childhood music program.
Fantastic. Okay, so you came across my radar because you had created some fantastic materials that I thought looked really interesting. Obviously, not directly relevant for me because we're talking about violin, but I always like to see creators coming out with stuff. So, can you tell me what motivated you to want to create your own materials rather than just using what was out there?
Absolutely. So I love talking to piano teachers about this because I feel like piano teachers get it in a way that violin teachers haven't been exposed to that. So in the piano world, every piano method that I've seen has like level one, level two, level three, level four, but they also have a primer level, right? So you're starting a really young student. You have this primer book that is perfectly geared towards young students and what young students need. And not all students need it. Some can start at book one, but you have this primer option. Well, in the violin world, there's no primer books. All the violin methods begin at level one, and they fit all these foundational materials into a level one book. And so if you can imagine, piano, there's all these foundation materials, but violin, it's especially so, okay? It's an awkward instrument. It fits on your shoulder. You can't just sit down to it. You have to have exact posture in a way pianists don't. And so the need for a primer book is much, much greater with violins. So there's no primer books, but there are a lot of great skills that teachers use to get to book one. So if you have a 3-year-old coming in, and typically this happens in Suzuki studios, so I'm a Suzuki teacher and I have a lot of 3-year-olds coming in. Suzuki teachers have these traditions and these songs of how to get from that first lesson to twinkle. And it's even called pre-twinkle, a term that I don't use anymore. We had all these traditions, but we didn't actually have a primer book. And all these traditions were based around these are the skills you need to know, and here's a few songs you can use that we've just made up to help you with those. But those songs, they weren't harmonic. They weren't like they didn't have singable melodies. They didn't have deep harmonies. They didn't exist outside the Suzuki bubble. But as a teacher, I didn't think about all that. I didn't even realize there was a problem at all with what was going on until I became a mom, right? So as a Suzuki teacher, I had taken hundreds of kids from their first lesson into book one, no problem. No problem. I used the traditional methods, the traditional songs and techniques, and it was fine. And then I became a mom. And so when my daughter became 3, I'm like, oh, I'm going to teach her violin because that's what a good mom Suzuki teacher does. And it did not go as planned. She wanted to just make the music. I wanted her to have immaculate technique. Neither of those things happened, right? She just wanted to make great music. But there wasn't any great music for this age group. There was just these made up songs to get you to the first song of Suzuki Book One, which is Twinkle, Twinkle, Little Star. And so I realized something needed to change. If my relationship with my daughter was going to survive, one, if two, we were going to actually keep doing violin lessons, something needed to change. So I thought back years and years before when I was an intern at the University of New Mexico. I was teaching in an early childhood class, and they were doing this song, John the Rabbit, and they were having so much fun. And then immediately I went to my violin class I was teaching, and I taught that class, and the kids were able to play it. right away because it's just an open E string, dun dun, oh John the Rabbit, bum bum. And they just played the response and the kids loved it. And so I thought back to that experience and I'm like, you know what, there something important happened there. They were playing music they loved and they were able to play it even though they weren't able to play Twinkle. And so I'm like, okay, I'm going to build off this. So I started finding music that my daughter could play with her very limited skills that she also liked. And this came from the traditional repertoire. So it was music that had passed the test of time. It had intriguing melodies, great harmonies. It can be orally passed down. And I got, a collections of songs that we liked, and I got her through to Twinkle. And then as more students came in, I'm like, you know what, this needs to not just be great music. We need to make this pedagogically sound too. So then I collected every single skill a child needed from their very first lesson all the way to book one. And then I started pairing it. I'm like, okay, these songs I love, they can go here and here and here. But now we have all these gaps and we need to fill these gaps. So then I started searching for music that could specifically fill those gaps. So what came out of it was a book of 33 songs for the 33 techniques you need to get from your first lesson to Twinkle. And we ended up calling it We, W-E-E, Violin. We being the age of the child. This is designed for really small children, but also we being the community of music makers, past and present, right? It all is traditional tunes that millions of people have sung for generations all across the world. We ended up making it a global curriculum. So music from 24 different cultures, 14 different countries. So don't quote me on that. I'd have to look at the exact numbers. All coming together to build a violinist.
Wow. Thank you for giving us that background. I think a lot of piano teachers listening to this will be bowled over that didn't exist, first of all. But also, it's something I've been aware of for quite a long time, is the advantage we have as piano teachers that the notes are all there, right? Even that basic fact, like they're in front of you, you can see them. Yes, we have to work to get preschoolers to even recognize the groups of 2 and 3 black keys. With violin or with most other instruments, you're talking about notes that are not just there. Like, you have to find them. You have to learn how to navigate the whole thing. They're not laid out in front of you in the way that they are on a piano. So it's baffling that there was nothing laid out that could take teachers towards that. And as well as what you mentioned, like all the technique and everything that's involved in even holding the violin and the bow correctly. I'm aware of some of it as an outsider. So yeah, that's amazing. And what I love about it most is it's what I would call democratic in terms of like the way piano methods. There were teachers before mainstream piano methods existed. There were teachers doing their own thing, and some were doing things that were great and some were doing things that were iffy. They were all just doing it in their own bubble. And the piano methods really were the start of that becoming more, okay, everyone knows the secrets. Like, there's no secret sauce that's hidden behind a closed door. And then the internet was the next wave of that. So I love that you're bringing this to more teachers who maybe, they're not Suzuki trained. Like, not every violin teacher does Suzuki, or they don't have something else to follow. And we can feel like we're just searching in the dark. So yeah, I love that. And I love that it's based on real music. I think that's fantastic.
I absolutely love everything you just said. I love that. Yeah, we're making it available to the masses. You don't have to have training. And also, you're right. Like, the violin is not a fretted instrument that like you don't know where the notes are, which makes it all the more important to have music you can sing to that has melodies, right? Because it's through developing the singing voice that kids recognize where notes are and recognize where to put their fingers. And if you don't have a repertoire that's singable, you're never going to be able to develop the ear to be able to play a non-fretted or non-noted instrument.
Yes, which fits in with Suzuki and also with Kodai and many other educational philosophies that we have to be able to, especially if we're talking about young kids, we have to use the voice, we have to use their ear, because their visual analysis of things is not going to be up to that standard. And expecting a little kid, that's really what I feel. You can tell me if I'm wrong about this, but what you're describing with the Suzuki, we have to get through all these techniques and then we get to Twinkle. We're relying on a parent just enforcing that at home. not we, you, like the violin teachers are relying on just a parent following through and making sure their child does that and maybe rewarding it with something else because they're not being rewarded by the music that they're playing. Have I got that right?
Oh, that is so beautifully said. They're not being rewarded by the music they are playing. I love that. I love that. Thank you for saying that. That's absolutely right. And you mentioned, all these brilliant pedagogues around. I think the thing they had in common, and I'm going to use this terminology, is you develop the first instrument first. You develop the body and the voice first. And as a piano teacher, a violin teacher, they come into the lesson and the parent expects you to teach piano or teach violin. And yes, we're going to teach them piano or violin, but we also have to develop their ability to sing, their ability to move in time. And one, because it helps with the instrument, right? And that's what we can sell to the parents. You're paying for violin lessons. Well, this is going to help violin lessons. But I think even a bigger reason than that is we want these kids to be musicians away from the piano, away from the violin. We want them to be able to sing Happy Birthday in tune. We want them to be able to dance in time at their wedding. We want them to be able to sit around the campfire and have a repertoire of songs to sing, whether they have music or an instrument in front of them or not. So we're developing this complete musician that, just like you said, is being rewarded by the music and making the music.
Yeah, and is able to hear in 3D as I think about it. Some people are not even hearing the multiple layers in music. You slowly realize that as you grow up. Like, oh, other people are not hearing what I'm hearing. And that's something beautiful that we can pass on to students, whether they continue with that particular instrument or not. And if we want to be bigger than that, like the beat keeping and all of that, that's correlated with reading success. So it's much broader than just music. But yes, even as it directly relates to playing that musical instrument that we're supposed to be teaching them, we have to teach these core musical skills because they're not really taught elsewhere unless they happen to pick them up. So you had these 33 techniques and these songs kind of matched to them. Where did it go from there? Because I know many teachers out there are thinking, yeah, I have ideas like this. I have this dream of this particular resource. Where did you go with it? Did you go find a designer or someone experienced with writing music books or a publisher? Or did you go about learning how to put this into a digestible format for other teachers yourself? Where did you go next?
That is such a great question. So I love the book, The Lean Startup, and it proposes this idea of having the minimum viable product. And you create the minimum viable product and you get it in front of customers as soon as possible. Don't waste time perfecting it. Just get it in front of customers. So following that model, I notated what pieces I had and I sent them to some close colleagues here in Albuquerque. And the feedback was not awesome. And they're like, I have no idea how to use this. What is this? I don't get it. So I went back and reformatted it. At that point, I had like what the violin plays and what the music is all in one line. So I like took it out, like here's the song and here's the spots the violin plays. The violin doesn't play all the melodies in my book. They just play like a counter melody or themes in it or an ostinato as is technically appropriate. So I separated it out and then sent it out again, and the feedback, and this went on, I don't know, for a year and a half, like maybe 10 iterations of this, of releasing and coming back and editing and releasing. And each time I released it to a broader circle. And so I did finally put it on social and did a beta launch and got it out and then got tons of feedback. And one of the biggest feedback is I need a training to go with this. And so I started doing Zoom trainings of this is how I teach it. And this was all to professional teachers. And so they all took it and they're like, okay, you teach it that way. Can I teach it this way and this way and this way? I'm like, yes, that's so brilliant. And so it was a collaborative of I showed them how I used the repertoire, but also I learned so much about how to expand the repertoire. After over a year and a half of that, I finally released it to the public. So you asked about self-publishing, printing, editing. Let's see. So I hired someone to do all the technical drawings. So I wanted the technical drawings, which, you had to have as how you stand, how you hold the bow, how you hold the instrument. I wanted them to be as simple as possible because what I found is photographs have such overwhelming information that parents don't notice what they're looking at. And even like sketches have a lot of overwhelming information. So I wanted just very basic outlines of something. So I hired a friend. Actually, I was watching a friend doodle at church in her doodle notebook, and I like looked over her shoulder and like, oh, she's the one I want. And so afterwards I'm like, I have this project. Are you interested in collaborating with me? So like I would take pictures of the students and then she would outline them and we went back and forth. So she created all the technical drawings. I did all of the note importing and all the design layout, which it was a hobby of mine. I tried to outsource it, and every time I outsourced it, I didn't like what they were doing and I felt like it was more work, so I just ended up doing it. My cover art I outsourced as well. I saw a piece of artwork of a globe with all these different kids around the globe with all different abilities and colors. And I saw that. I'm like, that is what I want for my artwork. So I approached her. She is a dear friend of mine and happens to be married to my husband's cousin. And so at a family reunion, I said, I really want your artwork, but I want it with instruments, and I want my student Boonmi to be the main person on the cover. Can you do that? Anyway, we worked back and forth on that. Originally, I had sent the manuscript to Alfred to publish since it was a pre-Suzuki book and Alfred publishes Suzuki. That was really the only option for publishing. And they never got back to me. Because it was a pre-Suzuki book, which was originally the subtitle, I had to go through the International Suzuki Association to get to the publisher. And eventually the staff at the ISA, the International Suzuki Association, was just like, look, Alfred isn't taking on any projects right now. This was right coming out of COVID. They're like, they are not taking on anything. Your book would be so expensive. It's color, they're not going to take it on. And I'm like, oh, thanks for letting me know after a year of waiting. Yeah. And so at that point, I pulled all the Suzuki material out of it. That way I wouldn't have to go through the ISA, and I just self-published it. And I found a printer in town, and then later a printer on the other side of the states to print it all for me, had it all sell on my website.
Yeah, I think it's wise to go the self-publishing route. A lot of the music publishers had various issues and changes over the last few years without going into details. So I think they're in a lot of flux. Do I think it makes sense to sell it for yourself? So you just sell it from your own website and you distribute it yourself? You send them off yourself?
Yeah. So I just got a shipping fulfillment company. So now they store all of my books, and right. It just is automated that they pull the sales from my website and they ship it. And then I'm on Amazon, and then slowly reaching out to different distributors and music stores to carry my book as well.
Yeah. Wonderful. Wonderful. So what next? Have you got other fun projects in the plans? Where are you going next with this? Or are you like, it's fine if you're like, this is my magnum opus. This is what I want to do, and now I'm just trying to get it out there. What are you working on at the minute?
That is such a good question. So my next big project, I am going to some conferences coming up, and I'm bringing students to those conferences to share. So hopefully by the time this is launched, I will have that under my belt and be able to put that in the past. Last summer, I started 100 preschoolers on violin. I gathered with tons of teachers around the community, and we said, we finally have a curriculum that we can do this. Never before have we had a curriculum that kids would want to sing and dance to and play violin to for a week. But we have that curriculum now. Let's do this. And so we're going to do that again this summer, and we're expanding it to have more kids come and older kids come. So we're going all the way to 9 years old, and it's just a week-long commitment-free introduction to violin. So at the end of the week, if they want to take lessons, we'll give them the resources to take lessons. If they realize it's not for them, we'll give them an incredibly positive week with the instrument. So we're just tearing down those barriers of entry that we noticed existed, of just giving parents the tools they need to make a decision about what's best for their family. So we're doing that this summer. And then my next big goal, this curriculum involves the principles of Suzuki, but also Kodai and Dalcroze and Orff. And if you see me teach, you'll see all those principles in play and all those pedagogues at play. And so I really want to start experimenting and exploring what that looks like in my level 1 classes and my level 2 and 3 classes, and how I can have more culturally inclusive repertoire in those classes as well. So we'll see how that goes.
Wow, sounds like an exciting time, lots of things in the pipeline. And yeah, I love the sound of that week-long introduction, because something like Suzuki, if you're talking about preschoolers with violin, you're normally talking about Suzuki, I think. And it's a big commitment for the parents, right? It's a big buy-in. Like, they have to work with their child. So I love that you're providing that introduction to kind of open it up, make it more available to different families who can test it out and see whether their child loves it, see whether it's what they want to go with. So, Crystal, I've loved this chat. And I hope that any violin teachers listening, or any piano teachers listening who know violin teachers, because we're often interconnected as a web, will go check out the book. Where's the best place to find the book?
So glad you asked. Head to my website, crystalboyakmusicstudio.com, CrystalBoyack musicstudio.com. There you can access a free masterclass specifically towards violin teachers, but piano teachers, cello teachers, lots of good information in that masterclass about teaching this very, very beginning lesson. So check out that free masterclass. And then on my website as well, you can order my books, crystalboyakmusicstudio.com.
Love it. Thanks so much for coming on, Crystal.
Thank you so much, Nicola.